Welcome back to another edition of the Better Decisions podcast. I'm really delighted today to have a guest in the show. It is Craig Studnicky. And if you don't know who he is the CEO of ISG Related, and most importantly, is a big producer of content and a real student of the real estate game, and an eternal student of the game, as he said earlier. So, Craig, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
David, it's a pleasure. And as I told you before we began, I'm a fan of yours as well. There's not a lot of realtors out there in South Florida that have real good quality content. I'm always digging and looking for someone I can even maybe borrow content from. You're one of them. So it's a pleasure being here.
Thank you. Well, the door swings both ways. This is hopefully going to be a really interesting chat because right now there's a big changing, shifting moment. And off the back of your last report, you talk about that. Before we get into it, just let's give everybody a bit of your background story so that they can really understand your pedigree.
Sure. Well, I'm 67 years old. I got into real estate when I was...
You look great, by the way.
It must be the yoga, I guess, or all the water I drink. Who the hell knows? I got into this game right after college, and when I was 22 years old. I spent 15 years in the New York area, New York, New Jersey. My first marriage ended in divorce. I moved here in 1991, and that's been 30-some years now as a real estate broker selling real estate in South Florida. I can tell you that 30 years ago, there were probably 4 or 5 new condominium projects that were started every year, which was back in the early 90s. That's all that Miami could really put on the market that you could expect any absorption from. I only say this to you because I mean, think about what's happened even since 2021. There's almost 50 brand new condos.
It must blow your mind.
Put on the market. Yeah, but the thing is that if they could all get built, Miami could accommodate them. So the explosiveness, the dynamic nature of the growth of South Florida has caught me it caught every fiber of my being. I'm so amazed that we're here watching this tremendous growth in not just Florida but South Florida. It's cool to be here.
So that will give you a very clear identification of what is to come in this conversation because it is shocking. So prepare to be educated.
Yes.
Let's dive into. Let's kind of go through your report because it's really been well read. It's been read by thousands of people, and every year it really is because you really dive in. What's happened right now that we were starting to talk about, and we're going to go through houses, condos, and new construction condos. That's really the framework of the market, and we're going to discuss each one, and then we'll get into some of the the subtle nuances and the behaviors that we're seeing therein.
Sure.
The housing market. The housing market is it's shocking, the inventory levels that we're seeing right now in the housing market. And you obviously reported that you said you've seen an introduction of bidding wars again in 2023, which just seems just bonkers, considering the interest rates.
Yes.
And considering, now where particularly are we seeing these kind of bidding wars happen? Is there a particular price point that we're kind of noticing this in?
All high end. That's what I'm noticing. Yesterday, for example, there's a beautiful condominium in Hollywood Beach called Trump Hollywood. It's one of the nicest condominium properties I've ever seen. It was developed by Related. One of my agents sold a unit for $2 million. It's about $1,000 a square foot. She had 3 offers in 3 days. That's just an example. So what I'm seeing is if the property is in an A location and it's an A quality property, therefore high end, that's where I'm seeing the bidding wars.
And I can attest that in the primary markets, that I deal a lot with Coconut Grove, Coral Gables, Pinecrest. I have an agent on Miami Beach. I have agents Sunny Isles, agents all over the place. But I noticed within the group that when houses are coming into the market, somewhere in the 1 to 2 million range, or even 2 to 3, it's almost guaranteed we're seeing prices go over asking price. I've seen that in a number of times, and by a fair amount. Now, when you get into the real luxury sector, and by that we talk about that, I only say $5 million anymore plus, because it's really like 10. The dollar per square foot's gone up so much in these houses. We're seeing, as you put it, like just such a shallow amount of inventory. Can you just expand on that within your report and how much inventory we've been seeing?
Well,
or not seeing?
Let me, if I may, let me respond with the reciprocal. It's what you're not seeing. That's what's a bit frightening. The developers, Douglas Elliman sells a lot of pre-construction properties. So does RelatedISG. My biggest hang up, and I know DE probably feels the same way, is the developer's inability to get construction financing to build. So when we talk about housing, there's single-family homes, but then there's condos. And now I'm watching condos becoming more popular this year in terms of the number of transactions, the velocity of transactions. There's more now on the condo side than there are on the single family home side. Now, that's for two reasons. One, there aren't very many houses for sale. You and I just talked before we started the show. There's only 4 houses for sale in Coral Gables. I mean, that's frightening.
Yeah, that if you want to see the numbers on that, look at my Coral Gables report. Okay. Because between 20 houses built that are no more than 4 years old, there's only, and I found, without stuff that isn't actually, let's say, designed or just dirt with a nice rendering, legitimately like 4 houses for sale in that market. And they're all going at record dollar per square foot that are quite honestly staggering. And then there's obviously another band of product which is kind of older. But you said very clearly, everybody seems to be focused on the new product. If given the choice, they'll go for a new home.
Always. It's always been, by the way. It's I hate to draw an analogy to cars, but if you had a choice to buy a brand new car or something used, the answer is rather obvious. People feel the same way about houses. The kitchens, particularly, let's just focus on condos for a minute. The ceilings are higher in the newer condominiums. Yeah. The kitchens and baths are curated by designers that only design kitchens and baths. This is a whole different standard of design that has now entered the South Florida marketplace. We didn't have this in the 2000s or the 1990s for sure. No, so when you get into that older product, it's so boring by comparison to the exciting design that these architects are and the developers are introducing to the market. So yeah, people always want. They don't want the new. They like the contemporary nature of this new architectural genre that's out there. Yeah. We hear it all the time. Particularly, think about the main buying pool is U.S. now. Whether they're coming from, I know everyone likes to talk about New York and Los Angeles, but they're actually coming from all corners of the United States.
They really are. It's coming from everywhere. It's coming from all over.
And their vision of their mental picture of Miami is, first of all, those blue turquoise waters, and the second is contemporary design. They came from a colonial home in New Jersey. They're not coming here to buy a colonial home. They're coming here to buy a condominium with a 10-foot ceiling, 11-foot ceiling, with these ridiculously beautiful kitchens and bathrooms, way different than the life they had somewhere in the U.S. And that you find that in new. And I'm also finding that the Americans, I laugh about this because I am one, we are terrible negotiators. When the Americans see what they want, they pretend to negotiate, but they buy. It's really the South American market, which is the second main market. They're the ones that take you to overtime. They will negotiate and negotiate and negotiate. The good news for all of us realtors, in a way, then, in that particular game, 80% of your sales are going to be from the U.S. So,
but is it interesting?
It's not going to be so hard
right now. I mean, the rise of the U.S. buyer in Miami has only come out really strong, or feels, in the last 3 years. Before that, we were dealing with Brazil, Mexico, and other South American countries. And right now, it's kind of jumping the gun a little bit from the narrative that I was going to go through. But hey, we're here right now, so let's discuss it.
Sure.
I noticed that the buying activity for the last few years with Brazil and with Mexico has actually obviously been low, because if you look at their currency exchanges, if you look at 2020, there was a big drop-off of Brazilians buying, and it's not hard to imagine why, because their real went to 6 to 1. It was 4 to 1, and it went to 6 to 1. That was a loss of 50% buying power right there. And Mexico, obviously, they had volatile pesos. In the last 6 months, the pesos has gained, I think, 15% against the dollar, and the real has gained 10% against the dollar. And there's always a desire from that market to come back in again. So we haven't even seen that yet, even in light of the lack of inventory that we've got. I'm going to move quickly through one question I had on the housing market, and then we'll get off that and we'll get into the condos, because there's a lot of meat in that conversation. But when I look at the newer homes on the water and the big homes that people want and the luxury houses, there's clearly obviously a very severe lack of product. That's very clearly established.
Severe is the right word.
What we're finding is that the price point, the entry price point to get into a nice house with let's say a water view. If you want a water view in a home, the entry into that price point is exponentially higher than it's been before, 50% higher, sometimes 100% higher than we saw 4 or 5 years ago. And you showed this on your table with just even the average home prices that jumped so much between 2018 to 2023, which was a huge, it was more than 100%.
Factor of 2 or 3, depending on where you were located. Yeah.
And that's not even considering the luxury product. Now, because that luxury product is exponentially so much more expensive, if you want a water view, if you want the turquoise blue, as you so aptly put it, you've now got to get into this position of maybe a condo is a good alternative. And if you've got a big enough condo, which they're building, big enough condos.
They are now.
You've got optionality.
Yes.
which is interesting.
Well, the reason I said that, David, is because you probably see it too. The Americans that are moving to South Florida have money.
Yeah.
They sold their homes for big money, and they have big capital gains. And
Yep.
the way the tax code is written in the U.S., if you reinvest 100% of your profit from your primary home into your new home, you don't owe a capital gain. You just defer it until one day you sell that home. Yeah. So they're coming with enormous cash. You're not getting them off the water. That's their mental picture of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach. So if they can't find that house that you were just describing, and of which there are very few, then they're asking us to bring them to the bigger condos. I call it the vertical house. They're not getting them off the water. They want the water. And as long as there's still condos for sale, large condos on ocean, on bay, on intracoastal, then the Americans are still going to gravitate to that for a while. My concern is that it may only last another 12 months because that inventory is drying up very quickly.
So let's jump to that.
Developers can't build.
I want to jump into that. So moving now to option B. Option 1, the house. Okay, lack of inventory. Now moving to option 2, the condo.
Right.
And as we put it right now, not the stuff that's being built. You can't live in that right now. And delayed gratification is when you've got that much capital and you're that liquid. Time is your currency, not money.
Yes.
And I'm seeing a lot of that. It's like, look, I make enough that it's more important that I live now. I don't want to live in 3 years from now. So
that's a typical American attitude. We're all more about immediate gratification. Hard to ask an American to wait. Not impossible, but hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so take us through the difficulty that we're seeing now with the resale condo market. And let's kind of get into a little bit about the geography, because I know people are thinking, okay, it's great to talk in general terms, but if I'm Bal Harbour, or if I'm Miami Beach, or I'm South of Fifth, or I'm the Bay, and I know you talked about the Bay quite a bit in your report about potential boom of that, or the coming boom within that area and prices now catching up. Where's the biggest challenge that we're seeing? Is it systematic, or can you give a little bit more precision to?
I think the challenge seems to me to be very much like the challenge we have with single family homes. It's inventory. We can't build fast enough to meet demand right now. The resale inventory of condos is dropping quickly. In my next Miami report, which is due September 30th, the end of Q3. We're going to do a deeper dive into the aging of these condos because it is the newer stuff that they prefer.
Yeah.
The newer stuff is drying up so fast. Before the show began, I was telling you about Hollywood, Florida. Hollywood, Florida, there are 0 condos for sale that were built in the last 10 years. 0 east of Interstate 95. Yeah. That's frightening. So now you're back into the 2000s, and there's not, in the 2000s, all the condos in Hollywood, Florida that were built in the 2000s, you ready for this? There's 19 in all of Hollywood, Florida. Now welcome to the 80s and 90s. So the challenge I think we have is getting these developers, whoever they may be, Related, PMG, to start building. We need to get more condos built quickly, and how nice it would be if it was on the water. The challenge is that developers can't build right now. Yeah. And it's not because of guys like Related. Look at them. George Perez has built 35,000 condos in 35 years. They call him the condo king for a reason. If anybody can do it, he can. But he can't get a guaranteed maximum price from a general contractor right now because of the floating pricing with certain commodities like glass, steel, and concrete. Yeah. As a result, you can't get a construction loan because the lenders aren't going to lend unless they have a GMP from a bondable general contractor. You have this, and all of this, to a large extent, is being heavily promoted by Washington, D.C., by Chairman Powell of the Fed. I'll tell you why. He not only raised interest rates 2 weeks ago, 25 basis points, he also raised the reserve requirement on these banks, which means they don't have as much cash now to lend. And that's not because they're so concerned about other regional banks failing as much as he wants to kill inflation. So if he raises the reserve requirement, these banks don't have as much money to lend, which means he's slowing down the economy on purpose, and it's affecting us here in South Florida. And
that's slowing down the construction process.
That's it. That's the reason why. Yeah. And if we didn't have that problem, let's assume happy days are here again, interest rates start going back down, the reserve requirements are lower, and we're having not fake groundbreakings, but real groundbreakings. There's been a lot of fake groundbreakings being promoted where they pretend to put a shovel.
Really?
Yeah, you know.
I know, but I want the audience to know, because I think when they're going out, and there are going to be a lot of people who will watch this, because we do a lot of independent condo reviews and new construction condo reviews, who are very sensitive to when they're going to get their product. As you said, Americans not very good at delayed gratification.
Correct.
So when I'm being told, okay, in 2 years I'm going to have my condo, 2.5 years, and I'm kind of like, it's not great for me, but I'll hang on. What you're saying is that in a number of cases, and if you don't do your homework properly, that's not 2.5 years. That's going to be longer because there's no financial motivation to start the hard construction process now. Loans are too expensive, costs are too prohibitive, and if they can just wait a little bit longer, and I think you'd said around 6 months, maybe a bit more, then you're going to see a lot more construction next year.
Correct.
But there's no guarantees that the timelines that some of the developers will give you are going to be accurate.
Forgive my candor, but it's impossible for them to meet the timelines that most of these developers have been promoting. I'm going to give you a perfect example. Aston Martin, beautiful condominium, beautiful. It's been under construction for 6.5 years.
Yeah.
And Alicia Severo is handling the sales. She's a friend of mine. She's hoping, as I cross myself, she's hoping that she'll start closings by the end of this year. I'm not a construction expert, David. On my way down here to see you today, I'm on 95. I looked at Aston Martin. There's no way that building's going to be finished by the end of this year. What's my professional guess, having been in this game for over 40 years, probably by next summer. That means it took 7 years to build 70 stories.
Yeah.
So when these fake groundbreakings have happened this year and developers say, we're going to build this building in 2.5 years. First of all, there is no construction loan for reasons we just talked about. So the reason for the fake groundbreaking is to keep brokers like you and I enthused, and there we tell our clients, no, they really are breaking ground, even though they don't. You get about 3 to 6 months of kicking the can down the road with a fake groundbreaking, and then it implodes on you because then the buyer starts to really ask some really serious questions. Well, you told me, and you said, well, the developer told us all of this stuff. The developer's just doing that to try to keep people in the game, kicking the can down the road, hoping that things are going to change. Yeah. Things are not changing so fast. Yeah. So what do I really think? I think that, and this gets into the bigger problem that you and I have, all realtors in South Florida have. I think that next summer, reserve requirements are going to lessen. I think Powell will have inflation under control, and then he's going to lower rates. He's going to lower reserve requirements. You're going to see a lot.
So you think low rates? Because you're the second person in 2 weeks where I sat with Eli Barak, who's the head of FIU Hollow School of Real Estate, and he said, off the back of another person that we'd talk to, because of the way the elections are going to run through to the next year, it's very likely, there's a high probability that rates are going to come down for various different political and economic reasons. But that will then obviously start to get things flowing again in terms of stuff getting built, which, obviously is a supply chain issue right now.
Oh, I agree with you. I think it could be politically influenced. I think it's going to be more economically influenced because by next year, if inflation's under control, then Powell has another responsibility to see the economy start cranking again. Yeah. And we need to see that. Yours problem, my problem. Think about all these people that are moving to Florida. We'll get into that in a second. Yep. They need something now. I can maybe hold off an American for 2 or 3 years. I can't hold them off for 5 or 6. No way. I'm not that good. Yeah. So you're left with existing inventory. Given the dearth of supply and the incredible population shift to South Florida, when interest rates dip a little bit, let's pretend it's Q1, Q2 next year. You haven't seen anything yet in terms of high prices. It's going to be wild.
You heard it. I believe this too.
No, and
that's exactly what I believe too.
I told you I had some new facts. I did this for a developer yesterday, and I'm going to share it with you now. Your sales, my sales, all sales for the first 7 months of this year, we're off 20% in terms of the number of transactions compared to the same 7 months of 2022.
Lower sales, less sales.
Prices are up 10%, and inventory is down 15%. So let me say that again. We're doing fewer transactions, but inventory's down and prices are up. Imagine then what happens when mortgage rates go from 7, maybe down to the low 6s. Yeah. Barbara Corcoran, who I'm a fan of, has said what I'm about to say. Wait till you see the explosion in real estate sales all over the country when mortgage rates start to dip. There's, according to the National Association,
systematic,
without a doubt,
a pump.
NAHB, National Association of Home Builders, they've been around longer than I've been alive, a long time. They're saying that there's over 5 million houses, not condos, houses that we're short of in the United States right now. So try to now just consider the pent-up demand that's being created from people that want to buy, but they're not paying 7% mortgages, even though 7% is not ridiculous at all. I remember the first house I ever bought was 9.5%. Back in the 80s, I realized, but 7% is not that obnoxious. But there's that mental line in so many people's minds. I'm not buying a house when the mortgage rates are 7, or I'm not going to sell my house to try to buy something else when the mortgage rates are 7. So there's this giant standoff. Therefore, a pent-up demand that's being created, while at the same time the population numbers of South Florida are real, mostly U.S., and as we talked about earlier, they're moving here permanently. I'm often asked to find people seats in private schools and refer them to new dentists They're moving here, David.
Yeah, and we discussed this earlier, not getting off track, but the attrition rate in the schools is less than 1%. We've interviewed another head of admissions. The amount of traction of flow of inquiries into South Florida, and we get inquiries through our website every single day because of our rankings on Google. And I will tell you that although inquiries overall have dropped, as a proportion to the available properties that there are in the market, they have not dropped at all. There's just as much velocity or people to buy a certain amount of product as we had in the peak of the market in 2021. And that's staggering. In terms of actionability, because all of this is great data, but I know people are thinking about, okay, so I'm a buyer or I'm a seller. What do I do? What's my action? As a buyer, if you're new construction, and we'll go through all three. Let's go through new construction, existing condos and homes.
Sure.
New condo buyers, you mentioned because of the slowdown of construction by the developers a few minutes ago.
Correct.
But under 30 stories, under 30 floors, those ones are going to get done quicker.
Yes.
Because there's less materials to build.
And if you're under 30 stories, it's no more than 24 to 30 months of construction. That's it.
Yeah.
But once you get to 40, 50, you're moving into high rises. And once you're over 60, you're into what they call super tall.
Yeah.
Super tall is a big challenge because the construction costs go up substantially. There are some buildings, and I don't know which ones right now, and if it's okay with you, I'm prepared not. I don't really not.
Yeah,
really,
look, we don't have to throw anyone under the bus.
Exactly.
You can do your research on your own, and it's all available online.
There are some projects that got sold that were selling extremely well in 2021, which I refer to as the video game year because there was nothing real about 2021. There's way too much money flowing around the world. Interest rates were 0%. It was 2022 when things started to sober up. Those projects, a lot of projects that were sold in 2021 were underwritten in 2020 by very experienced developers that didn't realize what the inflationary effect of construction, what the inflation effect would be on construction costs. Consequently, they didn't sell these buildings for enough money. So now that think about it, construction costs have practically doubled since
Not to be nefarious, some of those, do you think there was some corners being cut? It's like, look, things are getting more expensive. We can't afford to spend so much money on getting these done. We just got to get them done, and we got to find ways. It's like building a house, and then your GC says price has gone up. It's like, well, don't put in this, don't put in that, don't put in that, because I can't afford to.
That's called value engineering. That's part of the game.
Basically.
You know? But when these projects are branded, that you don't have that luxury anymore because the brands insist on a certain quality.
Yeah.
So you're stuck.
So money comes out of their pocket.
And some of these projects sold for as much as they could. But what I'm trying to say is that given what's happened on the inflationary effect on construction costs, they didn't sell them for enough, even though they sold them for as much as they could. There are some projects that are going to have to get canceled and probably redesigned and start all over again because the economics.
Yeah, there's a lot of them that kind of come out. There was a period of time where a lot of it felt like every week they would announce a new building and they'll be like, okay, so who's behind this? Well, don't know the name. Okay, where's the money come from? It's okay, it's all coming from the bank, and they need to sell or they need to get into contract 50% of that somehow this is one of the models of the deals of developers building. 50% need to be sold before they can get their construction loan, and they weren't getting there, and the projects got canned.
Correct.
So there's that element of awareness that comes from this. But actionability, going back to that point, for those who are looking at new construction, go for lower level buildings. If you need your product within 2 years and you need to feel like you're going to get it then. And then obviously in terms of quality, you've got to look at who's building. I know that there was a comment that came out, I think it was somebody made a comment, I think on The Real Deal, and it said, and this is not true of every developer at all, because there's some great developers out there. There was a comment that there's a big serving of arrogance with a side order of ignorance in the process. And we've seen that in the past before. But obviously the demand is such, it's so high. And you said there's only 6,700 units in the market. And the increase that we've noticed on the dollar per square foot that they're asking from this year to last year is only about 10% up.
Right.
But the dollar per square foot that the high level resale products is being sold is up by, you said it, the highest amount ever seen in Florida history
was the last 12
for
months.
resale condos in the last 12 months. It was like 20%.
Yeah.
Staggering.
Yeah. The shift from houses, not because they don't like houses, there's no houses on the water to buy.
Yeah.
I mean, not
so
zero, but close to zero. So show me the vertical house.
Yeah.
And whoa, look what happened.
Which means
the Americans want that turquoise blue water.
I've always analyzed the new condos off the best of the existing product because I don't have anything else to kind of base my numbers off. I don't want to forecast into hypotheticals in the national economy that I don't have any control over. But I would look off that, and then I'd be like, okay, so how does a product today, brand new, compared to a product today that I can walk into? And we would look at it and say, okay, these are kind of neck and neck. And buyers would say to me, well, David, I want to feel I'm getting some sort of 20% value. Well, if you bought neck and neck with the market last year, there's your 20% value right there. It just jumped 20%.
Correct.
So be aware if you're buying new construction. It seems this is the message I was getting out of your report, that buying new construction right now is still going to increase in value over the next couple of years from today's numbers of the resale product, even at its peak, because there's not enough product. The supply does not match demand.
Correct. And we're still seeing land prices incredibly high. The old rule of thumb is you don't pay any more than 10% of the value of the price of a condo for land. So if we're selling condos for $1 million, the land price shouldn't be more than $100,000. That's the old rule of thumb.
Okay.
If you're at 20% land, you better have an A+++ location and a very strong market, because your margins are going to be thin, but if you can get in and out quick, it'll work. But 10% is the normal rule. As prices of land go up and construction costs go up, developers have no choice but to hire these architects, perhaps brand them, to create these extraordinary properties, because they're going to have to sell them for a boatload of money to make sense for the developer.
And there's some big land purchases going on right now. There's some very large pending land deals where new construction projects are going to go up. Obviously, they've looked at the success of the Four Seasons in Surfside, which gets over $6,000 a square foot.
Nuts, huh?
Yes,
Before
nuts.
COVID, it was $1,800.
Just mind-blowing. Mind-blowing.
Me too. I mean, I feel like Rip Van Winkle. I've been asleep for 100 years. I woke up, and I'm like, everyone's telling me $6,000 a foot.
Yeah.
What the hell happened?
And New Yorkers are calling me,
years.
and they're calling and saying, wow, I'm really surprised. It's like the same as New York. But now, you've got buildings like the new Amman project that came out, got sold out. The new Four Seasons Tower that's going to be ready next year, that wasn't even open to the brokering public. That was just like sold in-house, all gone. And we're starting to see these super brands, these well-known brands coming through. I like to call them the real hospitality brands, because those are the ones that really perform well.
I totally agree.
They kill it.
They totally agree. It's got to be hospitality.
And if you saw, we did a study on that. Hospitality brands outperform normal brands by 136%.
I didn't do that study. I accept that completely. Because listen, when you talk to a buyer about a car brand, for example, I mean, Aston Martin's a beautiful building. But
I'm a car guy, so we can talk about cars.
Okay. I like cars myself. I used to road rally in my former life.
Really? So did my dad for Audi. Short wheelbase Audi Quattro turbos through Europe.
Oh my gosh.
The 1980s.
Well, I was all over the U.S.
That's another conversation.
Mitsubishi Evo. That'll be our next.
Oh God. Okay.
Those were fun days. God, what the hell were we just talking about?
So we were going through the new construction. See, this is what can happen in these industries. It's so much fun.
And
seriously.
it's Friday, goodness,
So the new construction condos, they just seem to keep going. They're going to keep moving. And if you are looking at new construction right now, there's a considerable amount of added value benefit by buying the right new construction condo in South Florida.
Right. We were talking about the brand, the car
and the
brands
hospitality brands are the strong ones.
The hospitality brands automatically, almost archetypally, talk to the buyer. They say, oh my gosh, I'm going to have all these services. I'm going to be pampered if I want that. But at the very least, if it's a Four Seasons, just close your eyes and picture what the landscaping is under the porte-cochere, and then carry that through every single square inch of that building. Yeah. And that's the peace of mind that every high-end buyer feels when you
and I think they're getting good at that.
Brand.
That resort level, like, I want to feel like I'm in a resort. I live there, it's my home, but I'm in a resort. So that's the new construction. That market's obviously going well. The resale condo market, the 10 years.
The pre-construction is going well. It just. I have noticed, however, that there are a lot of buyers. I'm feeling this with some of the agents with RelatedISG. They now buyers are getting very savvy about delivery dates.
Yes.
So you can't BS them anymore, because they're starting to. They see.
They're noticing. They're noticing it.
And if Aston Martin took 6 or 7 years. Use that as an example of how long it's going to take.
There are some projects that, look, we don't say stuff online. If you want to know what we really think about the projects, you call me. I'll pick up the phone and I'll tell you. I'm not going to go on YouTube on it, because I don't really fancy getting sued. But I do have the right to say that privately. We're right to our opinion. But there are definitely some projects that, to me, get sold off empty promises. of branding and other things that really aren't quantifiable, and they don't translate once the project necessarily gets built. And obviously when you've got things like well-established hospitality brands, they're so closely managed, they're so curated because it is a global brand that cannot afford to get damaged, and they have a formula. They know what they're doing. Like, I'm a car guy, so I have a Porsche, and I know that if I buy the next Turbo S, I know what it's going to be like. I know what the model was like before. Mm-hmm. There's a consistency of quality because there's a heritage to their skill set in that specific field, which not every developer can claim, although sometimes they claim that it is like all the bells and whistles matter.
Well, they claim they do, and therefore that's the beauty when you align your project with a certain kind of brand, whether it's a Ritz-Carlton, whether it's a Four Seasons, from the buyer, and the other benefit to the buyer when it's branded is we just talked about the value engineering opportunities for the developer are very limited because they have a lot to say about what the lobby looks like and the landscaping looks like and the swimming pool and the spa. Such a benefit for the buyer. But admittedly, it's a bit of a constraint on the developers. They have to follow the guidelines of these brands. Now, the benefit is what we just talked about, the benefit of branding it, but it's a little bit of a challenge for the developers.
Yeah. Now, there's only 64. Is it about 6,400 of them? I think.
Yes.
6,400 new units coming into the market over the next 5 years, and of course, there's a few, like the 1,100 I think you mentioned would be being delivered next year.
Are under construction, which should be delivered next year into early 2025, which is nothing.
Which is not, it's nothing, and then the rest obviously following suit. Now, out of that, what I've noticed is that a lot of the product that's getting built obviously is aimed at that luxury sector. On the mainland, it's over $2,000 a square foot. Once you get to the beach, it's $35,000 to $4,000 a square foot or more, and they're doing. What we're noticing now is a real shift in what they're actually building in terms of the floor plans. Much bigger units, primary driven, 3,500 square foot, 4,000 square foot units. I was asked yesterday by a client to value a property at 1,000 Museum. And I did my research to find a 4-bedroom or bigger unit on the mainland and then compare it to the beach, and there's not a lot.
I was going to say, like, you found nothing. The needle in the haystack.
I found the needle in the haystack, so I'm like, woohoo! But it's interesting because with the new product that's being built, there's an appetite for that. And I'm noticing that the real very high dollar per square foot premiums are going to these bigger units, trying to chase down a corner unit at Oceana or a big unit in Fendi. There was one on the market for like 1 day. Or a big unit at the Four Seasons or any of these other projects, 87 Park. I'm calling, and it's hard to find.
The seesaw changed. I've been in the game a long time. The price per foot was always higher on the studios and the 1-bedrooms, and the 3 and 4 bedrooms were here. Everything's completely flipped. As of the end of last week, Dade, Broward, Palm Beach counties combined, there's 250 3-bedroom condos in the MLS. Now, divide that 250 by three counties, then divide that by all the little towns in all these counties. There's no inventory. You did find a needle in the haystack. Why aren't there any more 3 and 4 bedroom condos for sale? Because developers didn't build that stuff before COVID, because if you wanted a 3 or 4 bedroom, you bought a house. We had plenty of them. Everything has changed. Developers are trying to catch up, and they know there's a huge demand now because the people that are moving here, they want the vertical house. You're not going to squeeze them in a little 2-bedroom.
Yeah.
No. Especially if they're married and if they have children and a dog and a cat. No, you need space. So they want 3,000 feet, 4,000 feet, 5,000 feet. David, they can afford it. So a lot of them will wait for the right property, and that's one of the challenges for you and I. We have to. I've learned on some of these pre-construction projects when I'm talking to Americans, I got to sell them on the idea that it's worth waiting for. It's worth waiting for, because I know these delivery dates is a stone in their shoe. They don't like it. They don't want to wait. So what do I have to do? I have to find them a house or a big condo to rent for a while, if I make this sale that it's worth waiting for, because the Americans are getting savvy. They know these pre-construction projects are taking way too long, and that's part of the reason I'm so confident. And it's a little scary, and my confidence is a bit scary. I'm confident the prices are going to really pop again next year.
Do you have the most confidence? Because I'm curious to action for buyers to take. Are you most bullish about people buying the bigger units, the larger units, than let's say? I know your buildings have 2 bedrooms and whatnot, but the ones who can afford to get a 4-bedroom. Let's say it's a guy who says, "I want to invest. I've got $20 million that I want to invest, and I want to do it in real estate because I want to diversify my portfolio. Do you see the recommendation is more for the right product going for a big 4-bedroom unit rather than buying two-bedroom units?
Yeah. I'll give you a perfect example, not to promote any specific listings, but I'm currently selling a pre-construction project in North Bay Village called Shoma Bay.
Yeah.
We've sold, I guess, 4 units, 2 bedrooms combined, to 2 Miami Beach residents that want to move to North Bay Village for a whole bunch of reasons we can say for another show, and they've combined 2 bedrooms. That's not unusual now in pre-construction. The buyers want space.
Yeah.
They want space, and these Americans, they want it, they can afford it. And the urgency for some of these folks to buy is actually when you study the shortage of inventory and what's in the pre-construction pipeline that's not going to be finished for 5 or 6 or 7 years. 80-story buildings, 100-story buildings, again, using simple algebra, if it's taking 6-7 years to build 70 stories at a project like Aston Martin, that's a fact. You remember Panorama Tower?
Yeah, of course.
Rental building in Brickell.
Yeah, tall building, tallest building in Brickell.
80 stories.
Yep.
It started in 2012. No supply chain issues. We didn't have COVID. There was no mobilization issues in terms of concrete trucks moving in and out. That was developed by Tibor Hollow, very well-known and successful developer here in Miami. It took him 5 years to build. By the way, it's a simple box. Architecturally, not stunning. It's a simple little box. When you start getting into really interesting design like Aston Martin, I think it's a sculpture. It takes a little longer because you've got a lot more movement going on with glass and steel. Panorama was simple. It still took 5 years. So I'm very sober when people ask me, when will this building get finished? I know this stuff, and I tell them honestly when you can expect. And certain projects I think are worth waiting for. Your company is selling a project for Related called Ravage in Bal Harbor.
Yep.
That's a property that's worth waiting for.
Yeah,
As
those prime properties, you've got Rivage, you've got Paragon, you've got the Shore Club.
Yes.
They're all relatively low boutique, low volume projects, very high end, pushing the levels of the market in a market that has really very little resale inventory. As if you go into the resale product that was built in the last 5 years, it's really hard to find anything.
There you go. You're not going to find anything that's new. You're not going to find anything.
So I beg a question for you.
Sure.
Okay, so you got a choice. House, and again, this goes back to the fact that we thought inventory was super low on houses and those have been going up in value. And then obviously condos as well, resales going up in value. You've got a choice. Do you build a new house or do you get into a new construction condo? Which do you see gaining the most traction? I know it's a...
What do you mean, from a developer perspective?
Yeah, if you got that
down the condo, that's where the juice is. The profit margins in a house are really tight, really tight. If you make a mistake, but condos, no. If you now that they kind of know where the construction.
And if you're not
Miami,
a developer, let's say you're a guy that says, "I just want to," because again, there's a certain level where clients say to me, maybe partly it's just that, let's say their vanity, but that I want to have my place done my way. I have the affordability to buy something that is exactly what I want. I want that like new car smell. I want to walk into the showroom and get that custom ordered, top of the line series model that I can just get, and it's just, when it's done, and it's done perfectly to what I want. When I look at the optionality, obviously of building a house, it's 3 years, or getting a condo to wait 3 years for that. People used to say, and I used to think, honestly myself, I would build a house. I think it's more profitable. But given the variables of all the things that can go sideways, and then the options within a condo, where's your opinion now?
Well, there's still with condos.
Still go condo.
Because there's more elasticity with condos. So if the developer, this happens to me so many times. I think our company sold over 110 pre-construction projects in 30 years. How many times has a developer, I sold 20% of the units, and he says, oops, I got to raise prices for all these reasons. It happens, let me think, all the time. All the time. So that's what I mean by the elasticity. The developers have room to fix their mistakes in condos when you have 50, 100, 200 units. One house, you make a mistake.
Yeah.
And you have to preserve your brand and your reputation.
Careful.
You got to finish it. So if you have to lose money on that house, you're going to lose money on that house to preserve your reputation. You have a chance to make it up many, many times in a condo. So that's where developers, that's why they kind of go there. And in Florida, I haven't said this in a long time, but people tend to forget that it's here in South Florida, we're kind of bracketed between the Atlantic Ocean on the east and the Everglades to the west. Land is so incredibly scarce now. The only way for us to grow and to accommodate the future population that's coming here is vertical.
So let's talk about the environment. And when I talk about the environment, let's talk about the environment and the climate and the environment.
Sure.
The insurance game.
Oh,
the big elephant in the room. Sorry.
Insurance is a 4-letter word now.
I know it is, isn't it? I feel like I say it and I'm like, insurance. I did a podcast with a guy who used to work for Siddons, and I did this podcast with him 10 months ago. And I asked him what's going on in the game. He said, David, you better hold on to your chair because it's going to get messy really quickly. Yeah. And then and now I don't smile with pleasure. I smile like, oh shit, it was like really, this was really on point. The insurance premium seeing in the older product, in the older homes, in the older condos is having a real impact because I'm seeing these carry costs just shoot up.
Great, especially with houses. I mean, it's bad enough with condos, but with houses, whoa, it's even more severe. Yeah, insurance has basically tripled, since in the last really 12 to 18 months. Hurricane Ian last year certainly didn't help. It destroyed Fort Myers, but you and I are paying for some of that right now. It's.
Do you see developers taking preemptive measures? Obviously, in terms, I've heard a number of buildings, they've put out their designs where they say, look, we are building a better, more hurricane-proof, more resistant, better adaptive project. Are you seeing there's value in this? Are you seeing validity in these things getting adjusted?
I was here in '92 when Hurricane Andrew blew through. Growing up in New Jersey, I think I experienced 2 hurricanes my whole life. You come to South Florida, whoa. In 1992, Hurricane Andrew, Category 5. They changed the building code, and now the building code in South Florida is the second toughest in the U.S. next to California because they build for earthquakes. Yep. They don't really make a big deal out of that now in terms of the marketing of these projects because I think everybody pretty much understands that the new building codes are very, very tough.
Yeah, there's a few buildings that are doing, like Paragon, for example, is building this like bathtub system where it's more resilient against the storms. I'm thinking in terms of not just how the consumers are viewing it, I'm thinking about how the insurance companies are going to start to treat the buildings and the new buildings and how they're going to move forward.
I don't know. The answer to that, I really don't know. I do get asked this question, though, a lot about insurance, more particularly about the threat of rising sea levels and global warming and in that vein. My tip, I have 2 answers to that. One is I was on my way to New York City. I was selling the W in Fort Lauderdale for Related New York, and I went to New York City for a week to promote it with a lot of agents. I probably visited 6 Douglas Elliman offices in Manhattan. And I remember the first day I'm there. It was a Monday morning. And some woman in the back who smokes too much, raspy voice, hey, honey, after I did this whole presentation on W, hey, honey, what about the threat of rising sea levels? I hear it floods in Florida. And I thought this is remarkable because I had flown up on that Sunday before, and I was reading in the New York Times a whole story about global warming around the world. They ranked New York City as the most vulnerable city in the world to the threat of rising sea levels. Number 2 is London. Number 3 was Singapore. Number 4 is Sydney, Australia. And number 5 is Miami. So my point to that woman with the raspy voice is, it's not that you're more vulnerable than me, but we're not talking about rising sea levels in lower Manhattan or the southeast coast of Florida. We're talking about the threat of rising sea levels on the planet Earth. So it's not a Florida problem per se. Yeah. It's really a global problem. But now my other answer is, think about Citadel for one, just as an example. There's now over 160 companies that are moving to South Florida, of which now over 62 are here. They're in big time momentum in terms of the movement of their.
Yeah, they do their research. They're not.
David, that's just it. As much as I know about the threat of rising sea levels and global warming, they know a hell of a lot more, and they're coming anyway. One of the things that I always try to remind people is the Everglades. Your beautiful wife is from Sao Paulo, Brazil. I'm sure she talks about the Amazon as the lungs of the planet.
Yes.
The Everglades is the sponge of Florida. Think about how many times we have terrible rainstorms, and 3-4 hours later, it's all gone. Yeah. Where did that water go? The Everglades. Everything is positioned to angle back towards the Everglades. That's the sponge of Florida. So while the world is heating and while the threat of rising sea levels is there, we have a God-given natural resource here that accommodates that, and it's been working splendidly for over 100 years. And I think that the companies that are moving here know that. And with peace of mind, they're moving here with great ambition.
That's an interesting fact.
I thought so too, by the way, when I read it.
I'm like, well, I got to go do my research now. I'm going to dig into this.
Or just have me on the show more. I've done all this stuff.
Okay. We'll get you on. That's a whole other subject.
Yeah, exactly. I'll save you all that time.
Thank you. There's two things I want to sort of get into, and then I think we'll kind of wrap this up.
Sure.
One of them is the the specificity of where the projects are being built. And we got into the mainland, Brickell, downtown, and Edgewater, the urban core. And obviously, what we've seen is there's a lot of traditionally the new construction was focused in Brickell. I remember in 2012 to 15 when we saw SLS and Bond and Rise and Reach and all these other buildings that kind of came up through into the market.
Yeah.
That was obviously Brickell focused.
Right.
The dollar per square foot right now in that Brickell market for high level resale, relative to what we're seeing on the beach, it's much, much lower.
It's much less.
And your prediction on your report was that we're going to see a surge in that market because it is dollar per square foot much lower than what we're seeing on the beach. And because I'm noticing people are really appreciating the design district and Wynwood and how Brickell's really evolved and developed. And then obviously the number of restaurants that we're seeing on the mainland increase so exponentially.
Right.
Your positioning and you're seeing that. So just give us a little bit more color on that.
Call it the trickle down, if you will. I think the first movement that we've seen since COVID are the super wealthy in the United States and the executives of these companies that are highly, highly compensated. And what are they buying? Water, ocean, intracoastal bay. But now their employees are coming because Citadel isn't just coming with Ken Griffin. He's bringing
analysts and
over 1,000 people with them. Well, they all can't afford to live on the ocean. They all can't afford to live on the bay. They're coming now. And that's why I think you're going to start to see the mainland start to pop because of it's the principle of substitution. I can't afford the beach. What can I afford? And how cool is Wynwood? How cool is, and by the way, Edgewater is now the most expensive. The downtown core has always been referred to as Brickell, downtown, and Edgewater. Edgewater is now the most expensive condo neighborhood in the downtown core. It's not Brickell anymore. Projects like Eliseis.
That's because they've got, in the last 3 or 4 years, you've had introduction to buildings that actually came online.
Yes.
Elisei, Biscayne Beach,
Paraíso,
Missoni Bahia.
Missoni.
These are the ones that we haven't had in
David
Brickell.
directly on the bay. And so you buy there, you're staring at this incredible wide bay, blue turquoise waters again. Every day, the Americans are buying that stuff like crazy. That's what they want to see. They've got swagger. The Americans that are moving here have a lot of money. The U.S. economy is doing incredibly well around the world compared to other economies. This morning on CNBC, I was watching. China's got issues now, serious issues. Argentina's got ridiculous issues.
Europe. I was in Europe over the summer, and obviously I'm from London, and it was a little sad, to be honest with you. They're really having a difficult time.
Somehow we're trucking along, even though we're raising interest rates. We just keep trucking along.
I get calls from London and Europe all the time, interestingly enough.
I'm in my next Miami report. I'll give you a little. I'm going to foreshadow it now. This whole thing that popped up, from the Real Deal and the New York Times, but that one little fact they took from the U.S. Census that said 80,000 people left Miami since COVID, and they neglected to mention that 209,000 people moved in. Just left it out. I'm going to be. I was invited by Teresa Kinney to be a guest speaker at this Rock the Market thing for all the realtors in September, and I'm going to bury that one. I'm going to bury it with actually what's going on in the world. I mean, because that stuff drives me crazy when the little journalist takes a little tiny fact and makes it a big deal. Our former president used to call it fake news. I'm just saying they got it wrong, or they just didn't have it complete. Yeah. When you consider this for 1 second, the United States is the third fastest growing country in the world. The fastest growing country by population is India. Number 2 is China. Number 3 is the U.S. You and I are selling real estate in the fastest growing state and the third fastest growing country in the world. So notwithstanding the benefit that we're getting from all these companies moving here, thank you, Mayor Francis Suarez, the population is growing organically anyway. It's growing organically anyway. So these 7% mortgage rates and insurance costs going up, can I tell you something? Not to be cavalier and not to be disrespectful, so what? It doesn't matter because the amount of people that are coming here over the next 5 to 10 years is so massive.
Well, to your point, if we're doing this at 7%, what are we going to do when it's down to 5.5 or 6%?
You and I are going to have to get up early, go to the gym like we're doing, and eat our fruits and vegetables because we're going to need all the energy we can muster to accommodate all that business.
I love your comment about the news. I think when you're going out and getting your information and you're going online and everyone goes onto YouTube and they go and get their news. And we even actually delved into 3 or 4 videos that went out online by actually people that were smart. And they made some really good comments. And we actually kind of dissected their comments about South Florida bubble, South Florida crash, Miami crash. People love clickbait-esque clickbait-esque comments. What really drives me crazy, I know it drives you crazy, is when we see something in a major news outlet written by somebody who neither analyzes real estate or sells real estate, and they've got 2 hours to write a deadline. People, be careful what you're reading, where you're getting your information. I invite anybody to call myself or Craig, grill it as much as you like, get as granular as you like, because this isn't what I call academic conversation. This is real world in the weeds conversation. This is what we do every day.
Your roots are from the UK. My roots are from Ireland. So therefore, we're kind of similar. My Irish blood boils when I read that fake news or all this bad information. So thank you for volunteering me. Yeah. Thank you for volunteering yourself, because David, I react the same way. Makes me nuts when people are misinforming the world about our place, South Florida.
Yeah.
You know what? One of the things I kind of crack up with is when I answer all these questions when they drill me, I love how they try to spike the football with what about the threat of rising sea levels. Yeah. You know why you're asking me that question? Because you got nowhere else to go. This is the most talked about market in the world right now, Miami. Yeah. I was in Dubai in February for a bunch of reasons. And when I tell people I live in Miami, you got to see the way their faces light up. And that's the other side of the world.
Yeah, that's universal.
Now, I've always gotten that in South America. I didn't know I was going to get that, so passionately almost.
There's some interesting drivers coming actually from that side of the world
as well.
I've had some coming from that Middle East section that you're thinking that's unusual. They're coming here, but they are. It's really surprising. I got one more thing I wanted to cover with you, yes, and this was something that you went into the hotel condo. Not the hotel condo conversation. The short-term rental stuff, the Airbnb, which for a while we all thought, this might go sideways. We've looked obviously at different condo product. We've looked at the branded product by the hospitality brands. We've looked at the middle-level product, and then obviously we've also looked at not what I call the hospitality brand, the hotel brands, but the short-term rental product. Because a lot of the high-level buildings, even the ones that are, let's say, luxury, that might have a hospitality brand, not all of them allowing short-term. In fact, most of them do not allow short-term leases.
Correct.
That's 6 months or a year, 6 months and a day or more.
That's lovely. I call that
which is great.
More like traditional living. Because I live in a condo that has I live in a condo in Sunny Isles Beach called Ocean 2. It's on the beach. If I want to rent my apartment, I can only rent it one time a year for a 6-month minimum. And you have to go through a tenant screening committee. But I actually love that because I get to enjoy quiet and peaceful enjoyment. Orlando, Florida is probably the Airbnb capital of Florida. And this year, the resale prices of Airbnb properties have dropped by about 20%. Yeah. And that's partly because Airbnb is so flooded with so much inventory that the rental prices have dropped. Mm-hmm. The problem with these short-term rentals, whether it's Airbnb or condo hotels, they never appreciate in value, ever.
Thank you so much. My God, I've been saying that for
No, David, if you want, invite me back. I'm going to New Jersey next week to hang out with my kids and my grandkids. Bring me back the next week.
I will.
I'm going to show you the study I do that I reluctantly hand out. Example, let's take Four Seasons in Brickell. Four Seasons in Brickell has hotels. They have condos, like traditional condos people live in. Yeah. And they also have a number of condo hotels. They actually do. They do a lot.
Like St. Regis does in Bal Harbour in the middle stack.
Like Ritz-Carlton does in Fort Lauderdale Beach.
Yeah.
Those 3 projects, those are the best you got. All of those properties have restaurants, they have bars, they have spas. They're loaded with the kind of amenities that a condo hotel should thrive from. In the last 10 years, the condos in all of those projects, the traditional condos, have increased in value by a factor of 2 or 3. So what was $1 million might be $3 million today. Yeah. The condo hotels, 0 over 10 years. 0. That's what's happened.
And when they go sideways, it goes like, remember Carillon?
Oh God, do I ever? Yes, exactly. Yeah, it used to be. It was Canyon Ranch.
Canyon Ranch.
Because a lot of these branded condo hotels, they're licensing agreements. It means they're 5 years, 10 years. Yeah. You got to watch out for that too.
I know people find it attractive and they think it's convenient and they're like, I'm buying a condo. No, you're not buying a condo. You're buying a hotel room that you're renting out.
Exactly. Now, you know what the resale values are for those condo hotels at the Four Seasons of Brickell? Just right around $500 to $550 per square foot.
Yeah.
Why would anybody buy any of these brand new condo hotels for $1,000 to $2,000 a foot? It makes no friggin' sense whatsoever. The salespeople that are selling it are promoting future income, and I'm telling you, it's a unicorn.
And if the wheels fall off, if people pull back because it's an asset on a piece of paper that is not yielding a good return, it's a bad performing stock, they're going to dump it.
Totally. And they're trying to, but you know what? You can't sell them
Because nobody wants a dog that isn't giving a good ROA. It's like saying, would you like a stock that gives you 1%?
Of course not. That's exactly what the projects I just mentioned to you, that's what they appreciated for over 10 years, 1%. I mean, reselling a condo hotel or Airbnb is as easy as reselling a timeshare.
Yeah.
Not easy.
Yeah.
There's no aftermarket for that. Traditional living, traditional condos, single-family homes, you make a happy buyer, you're a happy broker, everybody wins.
So I want to conclude with that. If you are looking for new construction, high quality, well-branded, if you are looking for existing condo product that's built in the last 10 years and it's in prime locations, if you're looking for homes, even though they're high right now, expect them to appreciate. The takeaway is they're going to still keep going up because the fundamentals of economics, and I'm a student of economics, always have been, supply and demand, people, you can't fight gravity. This is the law.
I can tell you're a student of supply and demand. By the way, you're very good at what you do. I very much enjoyed this.
I love this.
Your wife is from Sao Paulo. She knows everything that's going on with now the new president, Lulu, whatever that. He is now creating a new flight capital from that country. You're talking about 220 million people live in that country. Yeah. They're also going to add to the frenzy and the frothiness of this appreciation of this market. Factor
in interest rates dropping, factor in money flowing in from South American economies, which always loves to come to Miami, factor in low inventory supplies. How can this market not keep moving?
Only one thing. We got to start building. We need to build more.
Yep.
I'll quote Mayor Francis Suarez, who's told me many times, Craig, I'm concerned we're going to become a victim of our own success. We become the most popular place in the United States, but we need to build more, and they can't. It's not because George Perez doesn't want to. It's not because Kevin Maloney and Ryan Shear from PMG don't want to. They can't. They're stymied over high interest rates and the inability of lenders to feel comfortable about lending when a general contractor can't guarantee the construction budget.
So it's quite possible. I mean, next year, I know there's a few new names that are being thrown around, new projects that are going to come out. We're obviously waiting for the Mandarin Oriental in Brickell. That'll, come down, a new project there. We're waiting for another project to come up in the Grove. I'm speaking closely. We all know what's going on, or some of us, those close in the business, know what Ugo Colombo's doing for his next project.
Yeah, right.
There's still next year when interest rates come down and loans start to become a little easier and construction eases up, I guess it's fair to expect some new names coming out, some new product that right now we don't have in the market. It's not currently advertised or communicated, but it most likely will be coming.
And these new projects you're referring to, like a Mandarin, fasten your seatbelt, the prices are going to shock you. They're very high. Yeah. Very, very high. They have to be. Construction costs are that high. It's construction costs that are driving these big prices.
And they're high, but they could well be absorbed at that level.
Well,
let's see.
We'll see. I mean, right. I'm hearing Mandarin at between $8 and $9 million an apartment. That's a lot for Brickell. Because that kind of pricing is absorbed on the beach. Yeah. It's not proven.
I'm hearing mainland dollar prices coming out at $3,000 a square foot in some cases.
Yeah, and I wonder how. There's also a lot of new real estate projects that are no more than 5 years old, where you can buy for substantially less. Remember, these buildings are meant to last. You're from Europe. Yeah. You walk around London and you see buildings that
hundreds of years old,
thousands sometimes, right? Buildings here in Miami that are 4 or 5 years old, they're puppy dogs. They're new buildings, and there's a lot of those buildings that are still available for under $1,000 a foot, brand new ones. So I think the pre-construction market in Brickell is going to be a little challenged with that inventory, because the Americans don't like to wait, and the Americans are going to spend $8, $9, $10 million are going to go to the beach. So that's going to be. I'm not exactly jumping for joy at these high prices on Brickell, because I think that's going to have its own.
But I did this trying to find a client, a 3 to 4 bedroom unit on the beach, and we looked in Oceania, looked in other buildings. I can't get anything even at $10 million.
I know.
So I don't know. I mean, 5, 6, 7 for Brickell. It's not.
Then you got to wait.
Yeah,
you got to tell
them. You do.
Then you got to wait a long time. Then you got to wait.
Anyway. Craig, this has been amazing.
Thanks.
We're going to do this again.
For sure, we're doing this again.
Yeah.
No, for sure, we're doing it. I'd like to really get to know you, and we'll do more of this. And listen,
sure.
I'm an open book. I always say this to everybody every time I present a Miami report. Look, I know you're going to sell Miami differently than me. The purpose of me sharing this information gratis is that maybe we can start with the same baseline of facts, so we don't get into the weeds with a lot of bad information, oftentimes promoted by media.
Yeah. And for us, the way we work it is we work at a micro level, but we work within the group of what we call contributing minds. And contributing minds is that input from very smart, very astute, well-researched and and experienced professionals like yourself and other guests that we have on the show. And we intend to bring everyone together at some point and do a big roundtable discussion with the best minds.
I got to bring some wine then. You know?
Oh, yeah. You bring the wine, I'll bring the cigars.
Okay. For sure. David, hey, really.
Craig,
I've enjoyed this very, very much. Seriously.
Me too.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for another episode of the David Siddons Group podcast. Better Decisions coming soon.